Hey, it's Amy. How you doing? It is Saturday, and my neighbor has her boyfriend over. Typically, he comes over to visit her every week, it seems like, and they normally go out, but at the moment we're stuck on lockdown, so it sounds to me like they're either dancing or exercising to Latin music, which is fine. You know, that's good. Kids these days don't get enough exercise. You know, most of us just sit in front of the computer and drink too much. So, you know, get that blood pumping. Good for you guys. I'm trying to finish up my supply of St. Arnold's Christmas Ale because I really don't like Christmas beers, but I bought a 6-pack and I'm stuck with it, and I'm actually almost done with it, and I think it's starting to grow on me, which is sad because I'm going to be out soon. So today we're not doing an uber long video for once. I am doing the Final Fantasy-a-thon. I keep wanting to call it Final Fantasy readathon, but it's actually Final Fantasy-a-thon, and that idea was from Nikki, whose channel I will link below, and it's one of her original readathons that she came up with, and that means that for the first time since I started all this, I'm actually doing a TBR, which may or may not be a good idea. Everybody knows that I have problems finishing books. I'll start them, and then I'll start another one, then I'll start another one, and before you know it, I have 60-something currently reading books on Goodreads and no read books. So how it works is Nikki has set up a Google Doc with categories like pick a main character, pick a team member, or party member, my bad, and you're basically supposed to just select according to how many she tells you to, and do the prompts that are attached to those characters. For example, the first prompt says to pick one main character from the Final Fantasy series, and for this one, my favorite Final Fantasy protagonist is actually Zack Fair, but Zack is not a choice on here because Nikki isn't doing spin-offs or sequels, so we only have the core games on here. Zack is truly best boy. He's the reason I can never ship Aerith with Cloud, because he and Aerith are meant to be forever, and therefore I would always pick him if I had the chance, but in this case I'm going to go ahead and pick Zidane instead, whose name is coincidentally spelled like Zinedine Zidane's last name, but it's pronounced Zidane. He is a protagonist of Final Fantasy IX, which starts out with him and his band of rogues disguising themselves as a theater troupe. Actually, no, I think they are a legit theater troupe. It's been a while since I played, but I think they're a legit theater troupe, but they're infiltrating the capital and planning to capture the princess and holding her for ransom. So that's the premise of that story, and I like it best out of all the Final Fantasies because it's just less angsty than the other ones. I mean, it's still pretty angsty, and you know, Final Fantasy, deaths happen and all that, but Zidane himself is a rather cheerful protagonist, and I really like that in my male main characters. The prompt is to read a book where the main character has a secret past. Oh my god, like, can you hear the party going on behind me? I think they're karaokeing or something. I'm almost envious. So for this prompt, I picked Bungo Stray Dogs. I'm currently in volume 4 or 5. I can't recall which one. I will put up the photo for the correct one in the corner of my screen. But this is a manga that got made into an anime, and it revolves around this organization called the Armed Detective Agency, and they are a group of ability users whose abilities are named after famous literary figures in Japan, and the main character is actually named after writers and poets and playwrights and such. So, for example, one of the main characters is Dazai Osamu, whose book No Longer Human I actually read when I was in college. It's very depressing. Like, he was suicidal and also just a wild type of character. And the characters in the anime/manga are meant to kind of reflect like that. They basically embody what the authors tend to write about in their books. I've heard a lot of complaints where people are just like, oh yeah, he's not like the original Dazai at all, but I don't know what everybody else was reading. I've read several accounts of his antics throughout his life, and I think it's pretty accurate. Not that I'm an expert in Japanese literature or anything, but what I really like about this manga is that, one, it has excellent music, two, the characters are just incredibly endearing, even though it is a bit strange, especially in the first season. You kind of have to get past that, and then suddenly it just hits you. The story and the background of the characters, like, it just kind of gets to you, because that's when you kind of get to explore their character arcs more. I also like how, because the characters and their supernatural abilities are named after famous authors and their works, you kind of get to have like a crash course in Japanese literature if you're not familiar with it. Like, I knew these names, but I didn't know, aside from Dazai, like, I hadn't really read any of the other poets or authors' works. And there's like an arc later on where they run into like British and American ability users, and they have names like Mark Twain and so on and so forth. And they're like, I just thought it was hilarious, because those are works that I grew up with, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, because this is how it's perceived abroad, I guess. Anyways, at the very beginning, the character Dazai kind of asks the point of view character to guess what he was in his previous life, meaning like the career he had before he came to the Armed Detective Agency, and nobody has successfully guessed it yet. And the reality of it is a huge part of the story later on, and it's just so fun to like experience those flashback scenes, and those are my favorite parts of the anime, actually. And like I said, since I watched the anime already, I already know that like this character Dazai has like a dark hidden past, and therefore that is why I've chosen this anime/manga for this prompt. I might be cheating a little bit, but I think it fits very well. Okay, so the next set of instructions says to pick your party members, max 3. So I instinctively wanted to pick Yuffie and Vincent from Final Fantasy VII, but they are actually not options, which is unfortunate. I can't begin to tell you how obsessed I was with Dirge of Cerberus in high school, and like there was a lot of time spent listening to angsty fan-made music videos after I was done playing that. But since they weren't options, I had to decide whether I wanted to go the thirst route and choose Ignis, Gladio, and Prompto, the boy band of the Final Fantasy world. I can be their Asian female lead singer, we can be like that band, Naked and Famous. Then I thought about it and I went, nah, I think I'd rather work with an all-female traveling band if I can. So I ended up going with, especially after watching several different gamers play Final Fantasy VII, the remake, which I still haven't been able to play, by the way, because I don't own a PS4 or 5 and refuse to buy one. So I'm stuck waiting until the PC version comes out, whenever it comes out. But yeah, after seeing their dynamic in there, I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Tifa and Aerith. Tifa was actually a top contender for me anyways. I've always loved her, but I've always liked Aerith as well, but I like her more now, especially their interactions with each other, so they have great chemistry as friends. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Tifa and Aerith, and then I'm going to go and pick Garnet as well. So I am really adding and stacking up the books here. Hopefully I can actually get through them. But the 3 prompts associated with them are: for Tifa, read a book with a badass female fighter. For this one, I went with a book that was already on my TBR. In fact, I was planning to read it either in December or January, and that's Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. And as far as I can tell, this is a story of a family who has a history as warriors, I think. Like, they are tasked to defend their homeland, and the 2 main characters whose points of view that we are going to be reading this through are Mamoru, who is a teenager who is being raised as a fighter, and then there's his mother, Misaki, who has a history as a fighter, but she has currently pushed all that aside in order to be a housewife and a mom. And I'm assuming as the story goes along, she's going to have to eventually, I guess, reconcile with her past as a warrior and maybe pick up her sword again. So I went, oh, hey, like, I think that fits this prompt pretty well. So that's what I'm going to go with. Okay, for Aerith, the prompt is to read a book where the main character learns about their heritage. And for this one, I thought long and hard and ended up actually going with a book that is already on my TBR list, which was very convenient, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. And like I said, I haven't read this book yet, so I'm going to go ahead and cheat and look at the summary right here. Basically, I think it's about a teenage girl, so it's a YA novel, who stumbles upon this secret society that's made up of descendants of King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, and they have like these special powers, and I'm assuming that she has them as well, and she's just trying to decide if she wants to get herself involved with this group or not, or like fight against them, or what have you. So that is the book that I chose for this. For the Garnet prompt, I'm supposed to read a book where a princess becomes a queen. So for that one, I actually kind of cheated because I am already halfway through this book, but I'm reading Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, and I heard that somewhere along the line in this series, maybe in the first book, maybe later, I'm not sure, we run into a pretty prominent princess character who later becomes a queen. So I hope I didn't spoil that for anybody, but I think everyone's read the series but me. But yeah, Eye of the World is the first book for the Wheel of Time series. I think I talked about it briefly in one of my previous videos before. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings, where there is a village and it gets kind of set upon, and they run into a magic wielder and her bodyguard slash companion, and they kind of spirit away the main character and his friends, because they are the ones that are drawing the evil forces to their village, and they have to journey to the capital to keep everybody they know safe. I'm assuming, actually no, I know that Rand, the main character, is a chosen one type of character. So it's basically a classic type of fantasy novel series, but I am excited to read it, and I'm glad that if the people I was talking to are correct, that they this series fits this prompt so that I can just use it and actually force myself to read this series on time. So the next set of instructions says to pick your job slash classes max of 4, one for each character. I originally was going to pick one for each character, but then I went, okay, let's not get too ambitious here, Amy. You can hardly finish one book, and now you have to finish, well, how many are we at already? This is probably the 5th one. So let's not, I'm just going to go ahead and pick one. So I went with the Thief class in honor of Yuffie, but Zidane is a thief too, so I guess it applies to him, and that can be his class. So for the thief prompt, I'm supposed to pick a book with a dagger on the cover, and this was actually pretty hard. I went through my Goodreads to read list, and I found many books with swords in the cover, but nothing with a dagger, at least not that I can tell. I try to cheat and be like, okay, this sword looks kind of short, maybe it's a dagger, but no, I knew it was a sword, so I couldn't do it. But then I realized that if you zoom in on the cover of Mistborn, The Final Empire, which is a book that I have had on my TBR for a very long time, the girl on the cover, who I guess is the protagonist, is holding what looks like a dagger. Or is it a knife? I actually can't tell. Is there a difference between a dagger and a knife? Anyways, I'm just going to use that. So my pick for this is going to be Mistborn, The Final Empire, which, like I said, was already on my TBR list. And this is a book that is set in a world where I think this person who used to be a hero is now ruling the land as a tyrant, and he's ruled for a very long time, and it's just like very dark. And so it basically starts out with, okay, the villain's already won, and what do we do next? And then I think it becomes like a kind of heist fantasy novel, which is awesome. Like, I really liked Six of Crows, and like I love like heist movies, and I like fantasy, so this one seems to combine both of them, and I really want to see where Brandon Sanderson goes with that. Alright, next I'm supposed to pick my summons max of 4. Once again, I'm just gonna pick one. When I heard that I was supposed to pick a summons, I immediately thought Fat Chocobo, but unfortunately the Fat Chocobo isn't an option, so I'm gonna go with Alexander, who is another one that I really love. And the prompts for Alexander is read a book set in a city, which is easy peasy because I can probably just close my eyes and jab my finger somewhere on my list and I'll end up with a book set in a city, because I have many books set in cities, whether they be fantastical, historical, modern, whatever. I ended up picking Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin, and I actually already reviewed another one of Samantha Schweblin's books in one of my previous videos, and that was Fever Dream. So it's a horror novel. This one, I think, might be similar to that. It seems more sci-fi like to me, but what I'm getting just from the summary is that there are these little creatures like cameras or toys or something that everybody just has in their house, like in cities around the world, but they allow you to kind of get a glimpse into what other people around the world are doing, which is kind of like this in a way. Like, I'm probably not where you are, but you can see what I'm doing. But this is a bit more invasive than that, and it's just creepy because you are seemingly connected almost against your will. So there can be like some complete creeper like interacting with your kids and you wouldn't know because you can't really control who can, I guess, see into your life, into your house and all that. And I am very intrigued by that. I kind of want to see how she executes this plot and how it's going to play out. This is a reality that I can kind of see playing out in the near future, just with the way like our technology works and how like our homes are connected, like they're smart homes and everything, and someone can always just hack it and like see what you're doing. It's a bit scary, but it's almost a sacrifice you have to make in order to live in a world with just advanced technology and connection. All right, the last set of instructions says to pick one protagonist, and the person I hate the most in any of the Final Fantasy games is Hojo, but he's not on here because I guess he's not a main antagonist. But yeah, like, oh my god, like he is so creepy and messed up, and I actually don't believe that he is Sephiroth's father. I don't know if there are other people who agree with me. I'm like a Sephiroth conspiracist. I don't think that, like, there is no way this came from that. You know what I mean? Like, I guess Sephiroth does take after his mother more, but I don't know. I have this theory that Sephiroth is actually Vincent's kid. I don't know if that's possible. I don't remember if that works timeline-wise, but you know, Vincent did have a thing with Lucrezia, so it's entirely possible in my mind. And I, like I said, have an easier time believing that this came from this than that. Another villain I really hate is Arden. I cannot stand that guy. He is so annoying. Like, and I will never forgive them for putting him on the cover of that Fix-It spin-off. Actually, no, is it a spin-off? The DLC. The one, I didn't play it, but I saw him on the cover and I went, oh, I can never forgive them for doing that. Like, he doesn't deserve a redemption arc, you know? There's just some characters that you do not want to be redeemed because they're just so hateful. But you know, you're told to pick an antagonist. Like, I feel like you have to pick really the best antagonist. And with the Final Fantasy series, the best antagonist is, of course, Sephiroth, who I mentioned before. He is the main villain in Final Fantasy VII, and I love his character arc. So for those of you who don't know, Final Fantasy VII is set in a world where a corporation basically rules this city that's the main setting for the story. So the president is also the, I guess, owner or founder of the corporation, which kind of sounds like real life at the moment. But like, they use these resources that are killing the planet. So the main character ends up falling in with this group of, I guess, eco-terrorists who are trying to find ways to bring down the government and like save the planet. So this antagonist, Sephiroth, starts out as a hero. Like, he is a war hero. He has contributed a lot to the rise of this corporation and this essentially empire. And he like, he's part of this program called Soldier, and he's like their top ranking soldier. They're basically genetically engineered, like modified humans that can, like, they have like extremely fast reflexes. They're like incredibly strong, and like he's very intelligent. But like through the course of Crisis Core, which is that spin-off / prequel that I mentioned earlier with Zack Fair as the protagonist, you witness like his fall, like from like the hero of this nation to being the main villain of the entire like FF7 franchise. So it's quite tragic. I actually feel pretty bad for him. Like, I'm not one of those people that's like, I'm in love with Sephiroth or anything. He's like the prime example of an excellent antagonist origin story. Like, sometimes I hear the backstory for certain villains and I'm like, like, really? That's why they became a villain? But in his case, I went, okay, I kind of get it. I mean, no, I really get it. I probably would have become a villain too if I were him. All right, so the prompt for Sapphiroth is to read a book where a hero goes bad. And for this one, I actually have to thank this little girl that I met when I was working in youth services at the public library during grad school. She's like, maybe she was about 11 at that time, so she's probably like a preteen or teenager now. But she came in asking me for recommendations for fantasy novels. So we walked around the shelves and I was just like explaining to her, like, okay, this is what this series is about. This is what that series is about. And she in turn would like talk to me about her favorite series. And one of the series she mentioned, which was very popular with the kids that went to the library, was Wings of Fire by Tui Sutherland. Oh my God, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Tui Sutherland. Anyways, the specific book that she told me to read, though, is Darkstalker, which I think is a prequel to the books. Like, there are a lot of books in this series, and I told her, like, I just thought there were a lot to read, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to sit through all of them. And she said, you know what, just start out with this one, Darkstalker. And Darkstalker is basically the origin story of the main villain in the entire series, and you and everyone who is reading it already knows that he's going to be the villain because they're familiar with him from the earlier books. So since I am not familiar with this series, I would be going in going, okay, this character is a hero, this is his story, and then presumably it's going to hit me hard because it's about his fall from grace, and it's a children's fantasy novel, so I'm assuming it'll be short, but I still want to see how this is done because it has such a high score on Goodreads, and I think some of the reviewers are fellow old fogies such as me. So I'm gonna, and sometimes these children's and middle grade books really get you. Like, I read certain children's series that I went, like, they hit me way harder than some adult fantasy series have. Like, sometimes, like, middle grade books are just really fucking good. Okay, so that is it for the prompts, and I think I have a decent number of books to attempt to finish reading by now. Of course, my neighbors stop dancing and partying as soon as I'm about to finish filming my video. I just heard them leaving. Jesus Christ, couldn't you have done that a bit earlier? But it was quite entertaining to, you know, have the music in the background and everything. It is Saturday after all, like I said. And you know, I hope all of you do the prompts too. Even if you don't know anything about Final Fantasy and you don't play games, like, these prompts can be done by anybody really. Like, you can kind of just go through and like pick like maybe a character or weapon that sounds cool to you, or just pick a prompt that you think sounds interesting, because she has some really good ones on there. So like, yeah, if you see one that just calls out to you, just do it. Like, I think it'll be a lot of fun. And like I said, I'm going to link to Nikki's video on this below, and in the description box for her video, she actually has a link to her Google Doc that has all these prompts listed there. So just go over there and click on the Google Doc and scroll through and see what she has, and see if you want to do it. Anyways, I'm going to end now, and have a good rest of your weekend. See ya!